All right, welcome to the Stewardship Network's monthly webcast for September 2025. My name is Rob Luzinski, and I'm the community coordinator with the Stewardship Network. So first, I would like to give you a little introduction to the Stewardship Network, and then we will get on with our presentation. So a little bit about us. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization with an award-winning 20-year history. We are now serving 20 plus place-based TSN member communities across the Great Lakes with emerging presences across the country. And many of our programs, including this webcast, are available to everyone. So we have a lot of public things that people get involved in, as well as our member communities program. Our mission, we exist to connect, equip, and mobilize nature's caretakers. So I'd like to tell you a little bit more about the different aspects of our mission now. So first with Connect. We connect the specialized knowledge we've collected for TSN member communities from our vast partner network, and we share it as widely as possible. Equip. We remove hurdles for TSN member communities and like-purposed allies so they can pour thousands of annual work hours into their ecosystems. And mobilize. Through our TSN member communities and support of our partners across the country, we seek to make collaborative stewardship accessible to everyone. Now we will dive a little bit deeper into each of those aspects of our mission with some examples. So first, Connect. And we will start with a little bit of embarrassing news. So we had a bit of a summer bummer, and thank you to Bob Zammit, our communications director, for creating this nice little meme that expresses how we're feeling about the situation. So this July and August, our email technology provider suffered a major outage. So we were not having our emails get delivered to all of our subscribers within our email list. Many of you were unsubscribed by their system, and we're trying to get it remedied, but it's progressing slowly. So the good news is that we've gotten some positive updates from the email provider saying that the problem has been, a solution has been found for the problem. But we still are working our way through trying to add people back in that were mistakenly unsubscribed from our system through this process. So we wanted to let you know that if you have been missing our emails, we do send them fairly often. So if you have all of a sudden have not been hearing from us for a few weeks, we would encourage you to resubscribe with the link below. You can go to stewardshipnetwork.org/email, and that is the best way to ensure that you are back on our subscriber list and you will start receiving emails going forward. We will continue to provide updates through social media and also through our email channels about any other updates or ways to mitigate the issues that we've been having. But again, a big shout out to Bob Zammit, our communications director, for all of his hard work in fixing this problem. And we appreciate all of your patience as we've been navigating this. As we all know, technology is wonderful. It's part of the reason why we have this great webcast right now, but it is not always the most reliable. And so we're just going through it and doing the best we can. So appreciate your patience and understanding. And thank you for resubscribing if for some reason you have been unsubscribed from our email list. Now, on a more positive note, I would like to tell you about our call for abstracts for the Stewardship Network Conference 2026, which will be happening January 22nd and 23rd of next year. The TSN conference is back, but it needs your knowledge to keep our tradition of high-quality presentations alive. We are asking for speakers from all aspects of stewardship, and we encourage you to apply. And we would like you to submit your abstracts by October 1st, if you can. So please do visit tsnconference.org, and you can learn more about the conference, and you can submit your abstracts. It is always so amazing to see the different suggestions and proposals we have from across our stewardship community, all kinds of different people talking about a variety of topics, and your ability and your dedication to holding space and providing an opportunity to share your knowledge with other people is really what makes the conference such a special place. So please do submit your abstracts by October 1st. And again, that is tsnconference.org. Next, we will talk about our equip aspect of our mission. We're knocking on the door. Our Gloves for Good program is on the precipice of a major milestone, almost 50,000 pairs delivered. It is hard to believe that we are up to that number for such a modest program that has grown to be such a wonderful and cherished aspect of our work at the Stewardship Network. So we have all sizes currently available, but some are in rather limited quantities, so quick movers will have more choices. If you are looking for gloves, we encourage you to do it as soon as possible. Will yours be the new request that pushes us over the top? We hope that it will be. So go ahead and visit stewardshipnetwork.org/gloves, and you can make your order today. And finally, mobilize. We are so excited to announce that we have a new member community. So we have the Greater Cincinnati Stewardship Collaborative that has just officially joined us as our newest TSN member community. This group is serving Southwest Ohio, Northern Kentucky, and Southeast Indiana. And they were wonderful TSN Spring participants, and they're off to a great start all around. It was really wonderful to get, so Lisa Brush and I went down to Cincinnati last year to convene a group of people as they were trying to decide whether or not they should become a member community. And the energy in the room was so positive and invigorating. And it's so great to see that the group is chugging along and continuing to do great work in their area. And we are honored to have them as our newest TSN member community. So with that, I would like to introduce Tiffany Jones. She is the Community Engagement Director at the National Wildlife Federation. And today's presentation will be Urban Sanctuaries, Greening Faith Spaces, and Climate Justice. So with that, I would love to invite Tiffany to share your screen, and we will go from there.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Rob. I'm going to put us in presentation mode to get us started here. Can you give me a thumbs up? You see?
Looks great.
Awesome.
You're in.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Rob, for the introduction. And I am so excited to be here this month as the guest for the Stewardship Network. I have known about this network as well as organization for a long time now, so it's really an honor. And the team has been phenomenal of getting me all geared up. But I've heard so many amazing things about this network and this community of folks who are not only passionate about environment, but also people and how to connect those two. So I'm going to lead us with an introduction about myself, and I'm going to be talking a lot about the Sacred Grounds program hosted by the National Wildlife Federation. So I am Tiffany Jones. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Director of Community Engagement for the National Wildlife Federation. I have been with NWF for going on almost 8 years, and I used to study or in kind of past life urban ecology, have a love for urban communities, and I've always thought about how people and wildlife can intersect and connect. So this is really close to my heart. I'm a woman of faith, so this is also a personal kind of conviction and passion of mine. But today I'm really going to speak more on the programmatic end and kind of my role underneath National Wildlife Federation. But in the chat, I'm happy to speak more about myself, and I can give some more context as we go. So the National Wildlife Federation, and I don't know, I always plug in and say, if you know about Ranger Rick, then you know about NWF. So if you ever read that as a kid or you're sharing that with your own grandkids or your kids, I do that with my 2-year-old. This is an amazing organization that not just with Ranger Rick, but we have been around for more than 85 years. And we have been really the mission of uniting all Americans to ensure that people are thriving along with wildlife in this rapidly changing world, right? So when we're thinking about how to engage people in wildlife, we do that in various ways through wildlife recovery, climate solutions, clean energy, environmental justice, and education and community programming, as well as our kind of foundation model and federation of all of these affiliates that we have in each one of the states. So this is the range of where we are. We have a few regional centers across the country, and I'm going to be specifically talking from the Great Lakes perspective, but we have a regional office in the Rocky Mountain region, South Central region, the Northeast, the Mid-Atlantic, and all of these regions really have their own approach, focus area around how they are connecting people to wildlife, whether it be policy, whether it be legal, whether it be education engagement, a variety of different vessels in which we do this work. So our amazing team at the Great Lakes Regional Center, and this is a bottom picture of our last retreat. So we are a small but mighty team. And this kind of team ranges with a lot of our focus areas as well as our expertise. But we are really a team of passionate folks, of advocates, legal experts, community organizers, educators, dedicated to protecting, preserving, and restoring wildlife and their habitats across the Great Lakes. So our range, just as you know, if you look at the picture above, we cover Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, and Ohio. So along that kind of Great Lakes basin. And what we work on, and just a range of things that I'll touch on briefly is, when we talk about watershed protection and restoration, we do Ohio River Campaign, natural resource and protection around the Great North Woods. We work on algal blooms in Lake Erie. We're working to shut down Line 5 in the Mackinac Straits, thinking about habitat education, which I'll talk to you all about today, climate resilience around PFAS and our water quality. So there's so many ranges of things that we do in our region, but also how we actually connect with people in their communities, what they need, what their interests are, but also the solutions that we need on a community level. So wanted to give an overview of our region. So our mighty team of the community engagement focus work is we're a team of three. So I'm Tiffany Jones. I have two amazing colleagues, both located in Cleveland, Ohio, and Grand Rapids, Michigan. Sierra Rawson is our senior community engagement coordinator in Cleveland, and we have a community engagement manager in Grand Rapids, and they are working together with me, and they're incredible to support healthy habitats and communities, right, and inspiring the next generation of conservation leaders and stewards in the Great Lakes region. That's kind of our big mission statement, but we do that in a variety of ways, and we work in Toledo, Ohio, Grand Rapids, Michigan, Detroit, Michigan, and Cleveland. So I'll speak a little bit of the why to that, but I wanted to give a huge shout out to those two women and amazing colleagues who are doing this work alongside me. So today I'm really going to speak a lot to this program, this program Sacred Grounds, and I'll give a little history, but want to start us with a grounding of what it is, what our framework is, and how we talk about this to the world, right? So the Sacred Grounds program recognizes congregations, houses of worship, healing spaces, faith communities who both create, right, wildlife habitat and actually creating a native plant garden on their properties, but thinking about that active link of how faith and caring for the environment are one. As we know, with faith institutions, they are recognized as trusted and respected community hubs in our neighborhoods, whether you're religious or not. These are physical spaces that have held historical kind of significance in communities to be places for food banks, gathering, dissemination of resources, education. They hold a really sacred space, right, in communities. So the National Wildlife Federation really thought of this approach to not only thinking about schools or residential areas or businesses or institutions, but how do we think and kind of recognize the worship and kind of faith in of how we engage people with wildlife. So the Sacred Grounds program kind of was kind of created out of that stem of how do we reach people where they are, and houses of worship, because they're physical spaces, usually have some green space, right? And sometimes if they don't, we think about other methods, but they have an extreme and amazing and unique opportunity to disseminate practices outward and inspire people to do this work. So that's kind of the breadth of what I'll be talking about today through the Sacred Grounds program. So a little bit of the history of how it got started. This was actually founded and designed by Naomi Edelson, who is currently still our Senior Wildlife Partnerships Director, and she lives out in DC. And she really thought about, when we talk about, creating habitat through where we live, where we educate ourselves, where we maybe, lay our head to sleep, but what about worship? What about the other prong of a space where people gather? And so she designed this program with that in mind. It was first built out of a certification focused program. And what that means is that we have a Garden for Wildlife program underneath the umbrella of National Wildlife Federation. And that program really aims to help people kind of designate their green space through a certification process. You go online, you say, hey, I'm doing this work, I'm putting a sign up, I'm inspiring my neighbors. And kind of through an online certification network process, you're able to be part of this Garden for Wildlife program. And since in the last 50 years, we're engaging with millions of peoples and hundreds of thousands of gardens across the country, right? So it was kind of, initiated through this certification-like process, but over time, it's actually grown and deepened into more of a place-based, staff community-driven model. And I'll talk about that a little bit more, but really want to hone in again about how we're creating a movement of people and wildlife, right? To create and restore habitat where we live, where we work, where we play, we learn, and we worship, which is that prong that Sacred Grounds is coming out of. And so out of this, we have now been not only in the Great Lakes, which I'll be talking about today, but there's also houses of worship that we're working with in the DMV area, so the DC, Maryland area, as well as the Mid-Atlantic Regional Office as well. So we're in a lot of different places, but we have this more intensive place-based staff-driven model. So that is what I'm going to be speaking about today. So to back up a little bit about the elements, you're like, okay, Tiff, I have the mission, I have the kind of the bread and butter of what this is, but how do you all carry it out? What is the mission and the aim of this work? Well, to participate or to become a sacred ground site, you must create some type of habitat, right? And we really focus on native plants being one of the foundational elements that creates not only habitat for our pollinators and our local wildlife, but also for all these other benefits that I'll talk about soon. So we have to create a habitat on the property. We also believe in thinking about how are these spaces connecting their faith, their healing with environmental stewardship. What does that curriculum look like? What does that framing look like? That language, which is something that we, as National Wildlife Federation, we are not a religious institution, so we're not the ones grabbing maybe scripture or things like that, but we are helping to support those folks make those connections in other ways through our partners, but also amplifying their stories and testimonies. We also believe in engaging the congregation and its members. So usually, or sometimes, right, we know about our green team is usually 2 or 3 people and they do all the work, but we really think about how does this become incorporated up into the fabric of the congregation, but also the community. And then the last prong is, to the point of this hub and spoke model, and hubs being the congregations, the house of worship, place of worship, how do we disseminate those practices outward, right? So how can a space like a house of worship be an inspiration for folks who will never enter its doors or maybe not even see it when they're passing by all the time, but now maybe a moment to pause and say, well, maybe I can do that at my house of work or house of worship or my residence or my community space that I have in my neighborhood. So thinking of that in this neighborhood connectivity way, but also bringing and bridging greening networks. So to back us up a little bit to where we are, where we're placed, and the work that we're doing across the region, like I mentioned, we're in 4 cities, Toledo, Ohio, Detroit, Grand Rapids, and Cleveland. Toledo was actually founded, or at least they started their Sacred Grounds program back in 2017. So we're reaching a 10-year kind of celebration soon, which is really exciting. Detroit, we started that work in 2018. Grand Rapids quickly followed in 2019, and we began our Cleveland work in 2020. And out of all of this kind of, again, place-based, community-driven, staff-intensive programming, we've been able to support, engage, and uplift 120 sacred ground sites across the region through these 4 cities. Really exciting work and really a testament to the team, the partners. We would not be able to do this work without them, but also the interest in the movement building that's now happening, right? So we're seeing things not just on a block-to-block basis, a site-to-site basis, but now we have Toledo talking to Detroit. We have a Cleveland talking to Detroit. We're trying to build this mobilization of not just people, but also their habitat work as well. So to talk about the place-based, community-driven model, and I'm using a lot of words of staff-driven, place-based, community, and what that means is that a lot of this work, knowing that gardening and sometimes greening work can seem a little bit like a privilege. It takes time, it takes effort, there's equity involved, right? When we think about getting out into our environment and restoring and repairing or creating these types of projects. So one of the things our team believes in is how do we funnel funding, technical assistance, programming elements all year round that allows for folks to not only love the work, but stay in the work and to maintain the work and sustain, right? So part of the program model is we go after grants and then the landscape that we're in, things have been have shifted and have been challenging, but we believe that if you are equipping people to take on this work, then you should support them through some kind of funding and monetary support. So we obtain grants to then distribute that into our partnerships, but also directly into our sites through a mini grant program. And sometimes our partners also lead some funding strategies, but that is kind of core to our work when we're talking about that place-based community engagement. Technical assistance. So this is really nestled under our partnerships. In all of our cities, we have partners that are specialized and have long-term expertise long before NWF ever set foot into those communities, right? But have the trust and the technical insight on how to create a native plant garden. What does that mean? What does that mean with design? Where does native plant supply come from? How do we talk about maintenance and the maintenance manuals that may go into actual physical materials, but also hands-on workshops? How do we create this way for folks who are participating in our program to be kind of nestled with the partners who have been doing this work on a local level, to create that technical assistance and support for the garden. So then we think about program and educational opportunities. It's more than the garden, right? So how do we inspire people to feel comfortable talking about this work, sharing this work, inspiring this work with other people around their sites? So we offer a lot of peer-to-peer community scale learning. What that mean? Every program that we or site that comes through is in a cohort style. So we always have about 6 to 10 houses of worship, community anchors working in this work together. So there's a lot of time where I step back, or our team step back, and they learn from each other, like, oh, no, you shouldn't probably do that. Or here's how to promote. Here's a flyer template that we have. So we really believe in that peer-to-peer local sharing and that knowledge that is built through this program work. So we have workshops, we have hands-on maintenance trainings, we have skill building opportunities. We connect with workforce development organizations. So we really believe that the local community is the way to inspire us to not only stay flexible within our program model, but they are the ones telling us what is good for their community so they can be successful. And then lastly, thinking about the hub and spoke model again, and I'll mention that a lot, is how do we think about folks who maybe not aren't at the congregation, but they're around the community, and how do they get inspired to think about the work? So we lead annual bus tours in Detroit. We have a new garden pop-up tour model that we started in Toledo this year. Of sometimes the bus is a little bit too complicated, and I don't like buses without air conditioning, so we got to figure something else out with that. But there's a way to think about a pop-up tour where people just show up at the garden. There's a tour with the folks who are at the congregation to talk about their gardens, and they kind of just pop around the city to different ones that they're interested in. We've been incorporating ribbon cutting ceremonies and thinking about how can folks from the community come to the garden, and maybe they weren't a part of Dig Day or Plant Day, but they just want to celebrate and bless the garden, or have some music and dance. So we've thought about all of these holistic ways of how these gardens are not just an ecological function, but they are built for social cohesion. They're built for celebration and joy and healing, things that come out of just the natural connection of connecting people and wildlife, but also people to people who would never have maybe connected, even though they're on the same block, by way of this work. So wanted to really spend some time talking about how we operationalize this program, but how that feeds into our ongoing programming from a year-to-year basis. And just a shout out, I always, always, always have to give a shout out to every single partner. And there's so many more of people, all the partners that help us do this work. And each of these cities have a range of, like, I will say 3 to 4, if even more partners. And they help us with everything from the technical assistance piece, right? The native plant design, nestling our program into the city initiatives and making sure that our program aligns with where the city is going for a 5 to 10 year strategic plan process. Advocacy and policy, how do we mobilize local leaders who are a part of the Sacred Grounds program and want to do more? Now they want to go to the Hill. They want to speak on policy work. How do we make those connections through our Sierra Club Michigan partners? Detroit Bird Alliance, formerly Detroit Audubon, helps us with our bus tours. So we combine Sacred Grounds projects with their bird habitat program, and show people a mix of what conservation place-based work looks like from a wildlife meadow perspective, and a very small garden that can still bring wildlife to a particular local space. Xerces Society, I know there's someone there in Xerces, so shout out to Xerces. Wild Ones, Woodlawn, Plaster Creek Stewards, Elgrow, so many partners that help us do this work. So I have to always give a slight shout out. So, grounding us again into the why we do this work. And I spoke a lot to the hub in the model of why we choose House of Worship, the kind of impact that the transformative work that comes out of this program as well. But, our team stands on a rock of believing that when habitats thrive, communities thrive, and vice versa. We can't do one or the other. We can't lead with one and hope the other one catches on. It is something that is interconnected. We cannot live without wildlife, and vice versa, right? So our work is grounded in equity and justice. And what that means is all of our program work and our program design is embedded in how we enter into community, how we enter into partnerships, how we sustain relationships, how we focus on climate vulnerable communities with even in a city. So that requires mapping, that requires us talking to community about where is the flooding happening? Where is their low tree canopy? Where is their lack of access to high quality green spaces for people to have to be able to walk to sit on a bench and reflect and to pray or whatever that means, right? So how do we do that landscape analysis and asset mapping, not only as an NWF head, right, but to think about how our partners and participants create that feedback for us, for always us to stay malleable and flexible to the needs of community. So I always, say and lead with everything we do is thinking through an equity and justice lens, community-led solutions, which will yield long-term resilience, and that's what we're building in this program. So things that we focus on to date across all of our cities: flooding, local flooding, which is actually an issue with all of our cities, right? Low tree canopy, promoting economic vitality. So what that means is, how are we paying our communities and putting money back into their pockets when it comes to building up green workforce, when it comes to maintaining those gardens, knowing that time equity and time invested is not free. How do we create pathways for younger high school students to be able to be a part of this work if they want to get into green jobs? How are we creating those pathways? And then creating equitable access to nature. So that just means thinking about how folks have access and be able to walk to and engage with green spaces in their neighborhoods. And again, ultimately promoting resilience, joy, and healing for people and wildlife. Place-based conservation, and this is the crowd that understands maybe a lot more of this, about the importance of native plants. You all probably seen this visual of non-native root systems versus native root systems. And so when we're talking about wildlife habitat, people say, well, what does that mean? I don't know, I don't like bees, but I can do a butterfly. It's really thinking about how we connect to people to talk about native plants, the importance of the tight woven relationship, right, between our local pollinators, our butterflies, our caterpillars, our bees, all those things that allow us to live, needs to be supported by the food that they have and the food that they need to eat, which is provided by our native plants. But we also know that native plants are not just our food, for shelter, for storage, but they provide all these other co-benefits that communities need to thrive, right? Improving water quality. They're critical for our local food web, which I said. Increasing tree canopy when we're talking about native trees. Improving quality of life and wellness. We know that being outside and seeing butterflies automatically reduces our stress level. So there's so many avenues and co-benefits that I talk about within this work, and our team leads with, based on the needs of community. And sometimes, and I'll be honest in saying, sometimes it's like, okay, I don't get that green stuff, I don't get the butterfly, but tell me about local flooding. Okay, local flooding is important, but I really want to connect my faith in environmental stewardship. So each neighborhood, each site, each community has their own way of approaching this work, which allows us to broaden our reach, increase our table of partnerships and participants, but allows us to even be able to not be in a silo of environmental stewardship, right? But able to reach people where they are, which is really the mission of our work. And saying small scale habitats can make a big difference. We do not work on huge acreage, right? We're not like the wetland restoration folks where we're going in and we have hundreds of acres that we're restoring, but we believe that every container garden, every small pollinator habitat, every one of those, and if you get it together on a block, if you have a neighborhood scale, they can make a huge difference. Everyone has to be involved in this work. So that is our heart. That's the way that we don't exclude. It is actually a way for us to be embracive, or to embrace folks and to be inclusive, and also acknowledging that cultural and traditional knowledge, right? And thinking about how each one of these sites may come to this work through a food sovereignty way. Okay, how does my black-eyed Susan complement my tomato? We're working in certain communities that has more of a food sovereignty need, but also are bringing their own indigenous or place-based food to their gardens. How do we talk about pollinators and produce? How do we talk about that relationship so we can bring other types of communities and demographics into the work? Nature-based play. So how are we thinking of intergenerational approaches with our work as well? So just wanted to speak on these different kind of concepts, and again, how we continue as a team to really reach the folks that need it most. So to give you a very high level breadth of Great Lakes Sacred Grounds programming in Toledo, that was our first city. They started in 2017. And their real, I would say, bread and butter is supporting these creations of small scale native plant habitats while focusing on mentorship, mentee, and strong community networks in the city. Our program is embedded in the city initiatives and things that they're doing throughout the city, even outside of the Sacred Grounds program, which is really exciting. Cleveland, Ohio, they center their creation or kind of program around pollinator wildlife habitat as well, while gradually building capacity and partnerships with food sovereignty. So think about food gardening, as well as green stormwater infrastructure. And I'll be speaking to that a little bit more, as well as neighborhood scale connectivity. So how do we focus in on one neighborhood and actually build out the connections there where it's a block to block basis of different sacred ground sites that are within walking distance, which is an awesome kind of model that we've built out in Cleveland. And then Grand Rapids, supporting sub-watershed restoration and education. And we just launched our Healing Over Habitat program there a couple of years ago, which really aims to include people of non-faith tradition or non-religious institutions that still self-identify as healing in safe spaces, but also allowing them to be a part of the program. So Sacred Grounds has its own place, and we're not dismantling that, but we also have had a lot of feedback of folks of like, okay, I'm not a church, but I want to do this work, but the model works. How do I get involved? So Healing Over Habitat has been an emerging program that we've been trialing out in different places, and Grand Rapids was the first city to launch that. So I didn't include Detroit for a reason, because this is my hometown. So I live in Trenton, Michigan, about 20 minutes south of Detroit. But I'm originally from Chicago. I moved to Detroit when I was 12. So folks are like, "You're not a Detroiter. You're not a Chicago." You guys tell me what I am. But I am a Detroit. I feel like I'm a Detroiter. My dad is actually a pastor. My mom is an educator. So I breathe this work. So I really this Detroit work that I've been leading since I've started with NWF has been my heartbeat. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about Detroit, if that's okay. But I'm happy to talk about all the other cities. We just don't have enough time for me to go deep dive into every single city and what we've been doing. So I'm going to take a moment to talk about our Sacred Grounds Detroit work. So I mentioned before that we launched in 2018 with the focus really kind of in the same way of the other cities, with a native plant small project approach. We've collaborated with DCDC, which stands for Detroit Collaborative Design Center. They work with a lot of community anchors and community organizations across the city of Detroit to design their spaces, outdoor spaces. So they're all designers. They come out of University of Detroit Mercy, if you've heard of that college. And that was our first partner coming into Detroit. And before I speak to the programmatic work, I want to say that when we enter community, one of the first questions, or the question we ask, is this program even wanted here, right? So we take a moment of pause before we get any funding, before we start any launch, before we do any cohort work. We say to our partners and the people in communities, is this a program that would support your existing work? Would this be a program that adds value to the community that we're serving or we would like to serve? And getting that permission allows for that open door, I believe, that allows us to do authentic work. So I just always want to lead with how we enter communities and how that has led to the success of our programs, because people have told us they want us here versus us parachuting in, right? So we started off with this small scale habitat approach, but in 2017, the city of Detroit recalibrated their drainage fee to account for impervious surfaces versus pervious surfaces on the property, right? So what that means is that your drainage bill, your water bill that you get in the mail for each property across Detroit is accounting for how much asphalt, roof, parking lots, all of that's on your property. And if you have a lot of it, you are now paying for that, because that storm water that's coming from your roof, coming from your property, is going into the drainage system, which obviously, in a way, we have to pay for. But in 2017, that notice was a huge shift for, or at least a negative notice for people or houses of worship, junkyards, places that have a lot of impervious surface. So this was a moment for the faith community of Detroit to, like, we were in an uproar of like, okay, we were once paying $200 a month, and now we're paying thousands of dollars a month because we have to count for a parking lot that maybe from a small congregation they don't even use every Sunday. So this was a huge moment of, I believe, the faith community really thinking about environmental work, maybe not for the first time, but in a serious way, because it's hurting their pockets, but also an amazing opportunity for Sacred Grounds to rethink and redesign how we do work in Detroit. So in 2020, we've reframed our whole program to not just focus on small or native plants and habitat, but to start creating green stormwater infrastructure projects. So I have a visual here on the slide that speaks to what a rain garden GSI, I say GSI, so green stormwater infrastructure, would mean. So as water falls, as precipitation falls from the sky, right, we have impervious surfaces like rooftops, again, like I said, parking lots, all of that. The water has to go somewhere. Usually it may go into a lawn, but it goes through these downspouts. And if you don't have a rain garden, it runs across your lawn and it goes directly into the sewage system. The issue with Detroit and many of our systems are these infrastructures are aging. So it ends up with overflow, which causes our local flooding, especially in extreme weather events. We're getting way more precipitation than what the infrastructure can hold. So someone has to pay for that system. And Detroit decided, well, the people who have the properties pay, which is not bad, but the way it happened did not create a restorative moment of how people are able to pay for these projects. So our goal and what we've been doing since 2020 have been creating medium to large scale green stormwater infrastructure projects at House of Worship to do what? One, mitigate local flooding, diverting the stormwater from our roofs, from these impervious surfaces, to be able to store that water in extreme weather, moments, and to store it so it's not running into the sewage overflow. Two is reducing drainage fee. When you create these projects, you can then go into the system to our Detroit Water and Sewage Department and tell them, we've created an intervention, a pervious surface on our property, reduce the bill. So we are directly combating drainage fees and giving these sites green credits towards their water bill. We are still increasing green space and pollinator habitat through our native plants. We are supporting local workforce through the Stormwater Specialist Training, which is a workforce built out in Detroit, led by Friends of the Rouge organization, to train up Detroit residents to actually maintain projects like this is going to be needed all over the region, right? So building up this workforce development program for each of our sites that we install. And then obviously promoting a greening network across our city. Right now, we just onboarded 10 additional sites this fall. We are at 26 faith institutions and community anchors that are doing this work across the city of Detroit. So just to capture, and I'm going to keep a record of time, it's 12:30. 12:39. Okay, I'm going to go fast. So Green Stormwater Infrastructure Program, this is kind of just the rundown of all of our kind of numbers of what volume storage added across our sites, as well as the trees that are planted, the people that we've engaged, and these are all the partners that we've worked with. We have 26 green stormwater infrastructure sites that we've installed. This is the kind of 513,000 stormwater storage added to date. 5 years of partnership with Friends of the Rouge and Sierra Club of Michigan, which are our main partners for technical assistance, engineering the project, native plant supply, all of those types of mechanics. If y'all know about GSI, all the things that go into that, these partners make it happen. We lead Bringing Nature Home workshops, which is an element that we have in every one of our cities that allows for us to hold workshops at House of Worship and then do native plant giveaways for free to residents around who want to learn how about creating those gardens in their communities or at their homes. So we always put those on as a way of disseminating those practices outward, but also promoting that hub and spoke model. We do bus tours and we engage hundreds of people in creating and maintaining these gardens, hopefully creating environmental and climate champions in our community. And just so you all get a rundown of like, okay, you do these installations, what does programming stuff look like? Well, again, Bringing Nature Home workshops, we do those once a year in all of our cities, and it's a huge hit, huge success for folks who are not a part of our program, but are residents or people who are interested to get a native plant kit, go home with some tools and be able to do this work, but they're leaving with some knowledge about how to create and maintain these native plant gardens. We do cohort gatherings. We do design charrettes for the community of designing their spaces. We do annual bus tours, garden pop-ups, ribbon cutting celebrations. I've mentioned that. Hands-on maintenance workshops, dig planting volunteer days, partner planning meetings. Toledo loves a good potluck. I like it too, but they love the potluck style. Virtual office tours, coffee hours for us to gather the cohort, sometimes virtually, just to check in during those low months of December and January. Partnership exchanges across the cities. How are our partners talking to each other, right? There's a really cool element to that as well. And here are just some testimonies and just pictures of some of the sites In Detroit, again, I can go for days of 120 sites across our region, but I wanted to focus on Detroit today. And this is Detroit Hope, and an elder Alan Jones, and his quote, as well as one of the members, Anthony Baker. I love his Anthony's quote. If you want our community to flourish, sometimes you have to take the first step. The more you involve yourself, the more it takes people want it to be like, let me give it a shot. That's pretty cool. I haven't read that quote in a while. Jesu Catholic Church, they are a school and a church together. So the students know how to talk about this project more than I do. So they're training up the students at the school to be their own environmental stewards of the projects that are created on the campus. Mary Grove Conservancy, a cradle to career college or campus rather, where early childhood education all the way up to college on the same campus. So this is one of our projects that we installed back in 2022. Amazing project, and has about 4 downspouts it's the rain garden is capturing from this courtyard. Grace in Action in Southwest Detroit, they had a ribbon cutting, a garden blessing, one of our smallest projects, both the most impactful, and it's in the most polluted zip code in the state of Michigan, 48217, right next to the Marathon plant. While we did this blessing, it was the wildfires and the most smog I've ever experienced, but people still came out, and the work felt even more important to do. So just want to give a shout out to Grace in Action and Pastor John there doing the blessing. St. Suzanne's, an amazing site in Detroit that has 7 rain gardens that they've installed. They're trying to be like, they're doing it all. But they are an amazing site that not only has a church, but they have the workforce development program that does their workshops there. They have an early child education program. They have a food bank there. They do conferences there. So they're becoming a resilience hub. They're doing solar installation. So they're thinking about, how do we maximize this campus to be a showcase of what climate resilience really is. So Steve Wasco is the executive director there. Detroit Zen, our first Buddhist temple, participated in Detroit this year. And this is the installation from a couple weeks ago. We have so much fun, y'all. I can go on for days. I'm going to keep going though. United Christian Church, we just did this on Saturday. And so this is a group of folks who came out and learning about this project for the first time, and the first kind of environmental project this church has done. So this is their first green team. So very exciting to see first time folks come on too. What's next? I'm going to say it short, and Rob, I'm gonna open it up for questions. But I will say, deepening roots in our existing cities. How do we go deeper? How do we continue to connect? How do we still support the communities that want to do more, need to do more? The work doesn't end in that way. So we're committed to continue deepening those relationships, scaling our regional network. How do we actually mobilize 120 sites doing this work, which is really exciting? Creating sustainable program infrastructure, website and things in the back end, building up a community of practice. What works with green stormwater infrastructure? What works with programming models like this on a neighborhood level? Elevating stories and testimonies. We should be hearing about these faith leaders and these folks all and everywhere in points of, especially now where we need more joy. And then shifting power and resource. I talk a lot about putting money back and thinking about economic vitality on a local level. How do we do that for our local leaders and partners? Okay, that was a lot. Go ahead, Rob.
I love it. Thank you so much. That was amazing.
Thank you.
So I just want to encourage folks to ask any questions that you have via the Q&A function within Zoom. You can feel free to share any links or comments or things like that in the chat, but asking your questions via the Q&A function in Zoom allows us to keep those all situated with one another. So I have a couple questions first to start off, and oh my gosh, so many good things. How do I even start? And I also have to say, on a personal note, that I am looking at St. Peter's Church in Corktown, Detroit, out my window, which owns my house, and they would love to be a part of the program, I'm sure. So I will definitely be putting you in touch with them. So that's amazing. So glad to hear it. So one question I had, and this goes back to something you said earlier in the presentation. Could you tell us about the transition from a more kind of certification-based process to the more community-driven based process that you were describing? I think if I understand correctly, you were talking about the history of the program, and I'm curious about the evolution and how it kind of came to the full fruition of what it is today.
Oh, that's a good question. And it's something that feels like a next step in
Mhm.
infrastructure, because a lot of folks will self-designate. If you're in Indiana, or if you're in California right now, or wherever, you're like, okay, I did it. What's next? We are in a place as a team, and mighty team of three and a few others, to think about what that mid-tier infrastructure means. And if you're not in those cities, but you want depth, you want that network, you want to be a part of this kind of movement, how do we create this maybe quarterly or something that allows for you to still tap in? So I will say now we don't have that like mid-tier structure. We're like very deep and then very light, but there is a need and a desire for folks to kind of tap into this network all year round, whether it be training or, hey, I need to really know what Sacred Grounds is about still. And so I will say we don't have that infrastructure built, but we are really interested in getting that started. So anybody in the chat, as well as you, Rob, and St. Peter's, right? If we're not on a cohort timeline yet of like, oh, you just missed it, how do we still engage with folks in that tier?
Yeah, thank you for that. So another question that I had was about, so I'm curious about the balance of urban kind of focus within faith communities versus, is it primarily urban, is one of the questions. And it's also really interesting just thinking about how you all focus and how urban stewardship just seems so ingrained in what you're doing with a lot of these projects. And so I'm curious if it's intentionally an urban program, or if you do also work with suburban, or what the overall how the
Yeah.
pie chart looks with all those different types.
Absolutely. I think naturally we have gone in the city, but it's not just the city where we're open to having even folks rural. I think an urban rural kind of connection would be amazing. And talk about the discussions that come out of that, of the differences, but also a lot of similarities. So I think this program can do a lot of breaking down the walls of how people have seen urban conservation or rural, there should be more. And I think places of worship of this program can be a merger of that. So, no, we are not just urban conservation, but we would be open to more. And I got to be honest with y'all, and I spoke to the grants. The funding is also one of, and this is maybe a time to be creative. Tell me where we can, like, start making these connections. Because I think part of it is who is supporting this work, who's funding this work, and how do we kind of pitch, right, the need to bridge across demographic, across geography, across state. And so, yeah, definitely, Rob. I think naturally we've gone to cities because they have a lot more infrastructure and a lot more things we can kind of hold on to as far as funding and sustaining the work. But I am totally open, and the team, and regionally, we're open to a lot more different geographies for sure.
That's great. Thank you so much. So then there's a question here, wondering if you have worked on any projects where you are replacing asphalt parking lots, for
Oh,
example, or
yeah.
changing the way that people are utilizing their impervious spaces. I know you're talking about, the rain gardens and such, but curious if there's been any initiatives about that type of stuff.
Oh, I want to talk to that person if you have some insight. But right, there's many strategies. People have been doing pervious pavers. Those are really hard to maintain and they're very expensive. We've also been a part of some depaving projects, which means just breaking up the asphalt, right, and just creating more of that green space. And we actually did our first rain garden installation post a depaving. And lessons learned. There's a lot of asphalt. It was still some remnants, if you will. And so working through those, but I think that is a strategy, with not just utilizing the green space that's available, but creating more green space. And so, yeah, we do that work, and a lot of our partners are on kind of the cutting edge and thinking about that. There's also some bioswale strategies too within the parking lot where you can kind of dip things into a swell, so it doesn't have to be a paver per se, but there's a bioswale element that is really helpful too. In JSU, if anybody's in the Detroit area, please check out their parking lot. And St. Suzanne's on the west side is also doing some work like that too.
That's amazing. Yeah, St. Peter's, the church I was referring to, so they had a big parking lot repaving project, and their requirement in the contract they had with the people leasing the parking lot is that there were bioswales implemented in that. So that's really amazing, and a great option for folks. So we have a few questions here with regards to funding. So one of them is, how much are faith communities expected to finance per project versus
Mm,
grants or other things identified by NWF? And then the follow-up question to that is, have you seen any funding changes given the current kind of landscape of
Mm.
environmental funding in general?
Oh, what great questions. This community is amazing. Uh, so I mentioned a range, right? So if we're talking a small scale project approach that we do in most of our cities, not Detroit anymore, each community gets $1,500, $15 to $2,000, and that is to pay for native plant materials, tools. We leave it very flexible. We don't pigeonhole people to what they need to be successful. If they're like, hey, Tiff, you gave me 1,500, but we're using 1,000 of it to pay a local team to just get into the work. Cool, right? We also believe that if there is maybe not a need for the bigger garden, but they just need to be teased into it and to gradually get into it, like we just need a container garden because our congregation doesn't know what you guys are talking about. There's an option there too. So we really want to be lenient in how we get people on board into the work. Now, our GSI work in Detroit is a lot more complex, but that means that we're like in a capital investment kind of hub where we funnel all of our money to get from beginning to end. That project is installed on our dime, right? And the city usually they did have a capital investment fund, but it was reimbursable. So you had to have $15,000, $20,000 just to do the work. And then they reimburse you when they're able, we'll call it that. And so our program has been really a great way to meet people where they at with funding. And so we provide the native plant materials, we provide the excavator, provide marketing support, press release report, flyers for your community, translation services. So we try to run the gamut of what it means for you to be successful, not just within the project, but the programming that can help you inspire and reach outside of your doors to get more people involved. So volunteer. So really what we expect is participation. And that's sometimes really hard to think, right? That's why I always leave with that. Um, Volunteer folks, so getting as many congregants as you can or members in the community to come out to those plant days. That's really, really important because we got to get it done and it takes us longer if we don't have enough people. As well as just the commitment to thinking about how your house of worship or your site is able to disseminate outward. And so we provide some of those tools at the bus tour and things like that, but we are always open to how a site tells us what they need and how we can kind of meet them where they are. And we just recently, if I can end with this, starting to put maintenance dollars to our site. So actually giving them more money for them to start, whether it's hiring a local teen or someone in the community to maintain that garden as well, alongside our stormwater specialist training folks as well. So constantly staying iterative,
Yeah,
valuable to the
of
needs.
course, as you must, as you must.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
that's so great. So I think this might be a good one to end on for the questions, and thank you all, everybody in the chat, for all of your great questions. But so there's a question about, are you also setting up other types of wildlife habitat features,
Uh,
such as sources of water or bird houses or bird feeders or other things like that? So curious if the majority of your work is primarily, green stormwater infrastructure, or if that is also other types of wildlife habitat too.
That's a great question. It seems like this person's a birder. So to the birding community, I believe so. I'll lead with one that some of our native plants are obviously attracting birds as well. Um, there have been some folks who have been putting bird feeders there. Let's see. We also have leaned in a lot into nature-based play elements. So thinking about how we activate site for more, I would say, people to be a part of the garden as well. So with birds, if you can include that, young kids love it. They want to learn and see what is actually happening in real time at the garden. We also have been doing some like kind of like community science moments of just a bio blitz of like what's here, like can we just document that and maybe put that into like a little visual for kids to go around and say I see this, right? So there's educational programming around that, but we're always open to actually thinking about how to not just draw wildlife but for it to be real for folks to engage with it. So I hear the question, but I think we each house of worship, and I can actually probably go back and Kathy, I see your question. It's probably you. I'm actually interested in talking to my team about that. Of like, how many birdhouses have we put out, and do we like promote that or not, or and if they are, can we like showcase that more? Because obviously that's of interest. So thank you. Hopefully
Mhm.
I didn't answer that well, but I'm sure
No,
maybe
it's great. Absolutely. I mean, it sounds like, the priorities are largely determined by the houses of worship themselves,
that's
and
it.
especially when you have something like the stormwater infrastructure that's also going to save them money on their drainage fees. That's just a slam dunk. That's the easiest one to do, you know. And then, of course, you think about all kinds of different examples of how you could do it. You could have, you know, food gardens that are integrated with some sort of, you know, natural landscape surrounding it or whatever. Like there's all kinds of wonderful things you could do
Yes.
with any house of worship and determining those priorities. So um, that is wonderful. I could ask you 100 more questions, but I will
Yeah.
not. I will now go into the transition for our outro. But thank you so much, Tiffany, and thank you to everybody that joined us today. That was such a wonderful conversation. Lots of really good energy in the Q&A and also in the chat. And so with that, I will start sharing my screen and I will take us through. So let me get over to that. All right. And hopefully you all are seeing my screen now. But so we encourage you to become a regular with our TSN monthly webcast. So you can register for upcoming episodes of interest. It's always on the second Wednesday of the month in the Eastern Time Zone's noon hour. And we'll always send you a morning reminder by email. So you can register a couple months in advance and you forget about it, but we will always send you a reminder. And you can visit stewardshipnetwork.org/webcast to visit our upcoming webcast as well as an archive of some of our previous ones. So now I would like to give you a taste of what we're looking for coming up here. So in October, we have Scaling Stewardship Outcomes and Impact Through Collaboration, Findings from the Field, and that's with Amy Mickle and Sharon Farrell of the Stewardship Network, some wonderful California folks that we have on our team. So grateful to have them. And then in November, we have Using Plants to Control Buckthorn with Mike Schuster of the University of Minnesota. I know that is an important topic for a lot of people on this call. Probably buckthorn is always one of the nuisance species that we have to control. So looking forward to that one. And then we have in December of this year, Cultivating Conservation Capacity, Growth and Change at the Kalamazoo Nature Center. And that's with Jessica Simmons with the Kalamazoo Nature Center, one of our longtime partners. And we are so grateful to have Jessica joining us in December of this year. With that, I will just say thank you, everybody, once again for tuning in. We are so happy to have you spending your noon hour with us today. We hope to see you next month. Thank you again, Tiffany, for a wonderful presentation. And until next time, take care. Thank you very much.